Notre Dame had their first open practice of the season on Saturday, and with plenty of reporters and recruits in attendance, let's just say it wasn't a banner day for the Fighting Irish offense.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome to Locked On Irish. It is Tuesday, April 4th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. As always, this show is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching along on YouTube, you'll notice that I got a new webcam. Looks pretty good in here. But I'm going to be honest, I was pretty pumped to get this set up, and then I saw myself in HD for the first time, and I don't know. Maybe I should have stuck with that grainy FaceTime camera. But anyway, if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you like this video below and subscribe to the channel. And hey, if you're listening to the pod, you don't care about the improved video quality, it's cool. My feelings are hurt. But you can still help out the show by giving it a 5-star rating and by hitting that subscribe button. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer for college football talent at the Fox Sports HQ in LA. And in today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Notre Dame beat writer Tyler Horka from Blue and Gold and On3 to talk about Notre Dame's first full open practice from over the weekend. I was obviously not in attendance, but the other Tyler was, so I'm really grateful he was able to come on and share what he saw on Saturday. And by the sound of it, it wasn't really a great day for the offense, but then again, it is just one practice out of 15 in the spring, and we're still about 5 months away from the start of the season. So we discuss what it all means because this group is obviously far from a finished product. Later this week, I'm going to go over Micah Shrewsbury's introduction as the Notre Dame men's basketball coach. Plus, it looks like he might be bringing over his entire recruiting class from Penn State with him. So I'm going to go over all that. And plus, we'll have some more recruiting talk about the Notre Dame football team as they just wrapped up another big visit weekend in South Bend this past weekend. By the looks of it, it sounded great, despite the fact that the weather in South Bend was pretty miserable. So that's good to hear. We'll go more in depth in that later this week. But as always, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Irish and on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod to stay up to date on everything we're doing over here on the podcast, plus the latest news surrounding Notre Dame football and basketball. All right, let's talk to Tyler. All right, Tyler Horka from Blue and Gold and On3 is back with us here. Tyler, you were at Notre Dame's first full open practice on Saturday, and I want to start by getting a sense of how you evaluate practices like this because we know it's a zero-sum game, and I feel like as a fan, I'm not always sure how to interpret all the reporting that's out there. Like, is it a good thing that the defense looked so good, or should I be more concerned about the offense and not put as much stock into what the defense did? So take us through your process in evaluating everything and trying to separate what's real and what's not from one of these open practices.
Yeah, what I think you're looking for is playmaking on both sides of the ball. So if you've read the reports and you've read our reports at blueandgold.com, you would know that the defense had more of the playmaking. That was good. I thought Clarence Lewis, for example, looked really good as a cornerback, stepping up on some routes, not just kind of being there as a corner like he's kind of been throughout his career, especially the last couple of years. I know he was good as a freshman. So I guess really, the last couple of years, You wouldn't say Clarence Lewis, that dude is a dog at cornerback. Saturday for 2 hours, he looked like one of Notre Dame's best defensive backs. So I think you take things like that and say, okay, that's really good. Now let's see if we see it consistently. Then maybe you have a guy in 2023 that you can feel really good about putting on the field. And then from an offensive perspective, you just kind of want to see more plays than we saw. I'm not saying that the 2 hours that we watched on Saturday, April 1st in the Irish Athletic Center is a death sentence for the Notre Dame offense. It wasn't. I'm still very high on Sam Hartman. I've watched, like we talked about last time, I've watched all of his games. Dude can throw an awesome deep ball. It just kind of wasn't there that day. And maybe that Notre Dame doesn't have to tell us like, hey, this is what we're working on in this particular practice. For me, it looked like they were working on a lot of shallow crossers, a lot of slants, a lot of things that you really didn't see a whole lot in the Notre Dame offense in 2022. So maybe that was a good thing that you saw some things that, and look, we'll talk to Gerad Parker, we'll talk to Marcus Freeman. So I think the context is necessary. And when we talk to those guys, they might tell us like, yeah, that's what we were working on. We were working on some of those things. Going into it, we really didn't know. So getting back to your question, it's kind of hard to decipher what you see in that 2 hours because you're so focused on writing down every little thing that you see. You don't really take the time to step back and be like, okay, why did we see that? And why was Notre Dame do that? So overall, it's the playmaking that we were looking for. And maybe the playmaking wasn't there because they didn't throw the ball downfield as much as you would in the course of a 60-minute ball game where Sam Hartman's probably going to get between 30 and 40 throws. We didn't really see that. He threw 15 passes an 11 on 11. A lot of them were over the middle. A lot of them were broken up by guys like Ryan Barnes even making plays. So it's, to answer your question, it's hard to know what you're looking at because you don't really know what context to put it in.
So you mentioned Clarence Lewis as a good performer, and then really the entire offense is sort of a negative. What other performances stood out to you on the field on Saturday?
I thought that some of the wide receivers actually looked pretty good, even though by my count, if you go to blueandgold.com, you would see that in the 11 on 11 periods, Notre Dame had 3 scholarship quarterbacks throw. Kenny Minchie didn't. In 7 on 7, Kenny Minchie was 4 for 4. So we had some jokes on our message board saying, hey, Kenny Minchie, 2023 starter. No, he didn't even throw a pass on 11 on 11. But I thought there was some good separation. Like Deion Colsey, for example, got open on a corner route. Tobias Merriweather did. Caleb Smith was fighting downfield. So on the few passes that we actually saw downfield, maybe they weren't completed, but the wide receivers were actually there. And it was like, okay, if that opens up in September, in October, Sam Hartman's probably going to hit that ball. It just didn't happen in that practice. So wide receivers looked really good. Jabron Payne is a guy that I think is the sophomore running back is kind of really the benefactor of what's going on in the running back room right now. Logan Diggs has been hurt for a week. We don't really know what's going on with him. Maybe DeLon McCullough will answer those questions for us when we talk to him on Thursday of this week. But with him out and Chris Tyree, that was the telling point for me when Chris Tyree did not go back to the running back room when Logan Diggs has been out for the past week, almost going on a week and a half now. Chris Tyree has stayed with the wide receivers. It's been Audric Estime and Jabron Payne in that running back room. And Jabron Payne had the best offensive play of practice. He kind of cut one through the middle. It was kind of off tackle, left run. And all of a sudden, Jabron Payne, all you see is number 13 going down the field. And you're like, holy cow, he might score on this thing. He didn't. He took it inside the 10, I want to say. And a couple plays later, Audric Estime is the one that scored for the Notre Dame offense. The only touchdown that we saw in 11 on 11. So the guys that did look good, I thought the offensive line was awesome. I thought the running backs, the two that were getting the ball, Estime and Payne, were pretty good. And that's Notre Dame's MO, right? Marcus Freeman just kept saying, hey, we want to run the ball. They did run the ball pretty well. And it wasn't like they were tackling to the ground every single play. So sometimes you break free if you're a running back on those plays. But the play that Payne did break up the left, it would have been a 50-yard run on Saturdays in the fall. So he's a guy that I look at him, he's like 5'10", 204 pounds. I'm like, dude, I don't want to tackle him if I'm a defense. He's a tank. He just hasn't gotten on the field because of everything that's in that running back room. But right now he is getting on the field in practice, and he looks pretty good.
That's really interesting because I think the sophomore going into the spring that everyone was excited to see was Jadarian Price because he missed all of last season. There was a lot of hype around him going into the fall. What about on defense? Anyone stand out to you?
Yeah, I really thought, I mentioned him earlier, Ryan Barnes was like, whoa, how is the look, I'm mentioning two cornerbacks who you don't think are going to play a whole lot this year, right? Because you have Benjamin Morrison and then you have Cam Hart. But I saw Clarence Lewis making plays and I saw Ryan Barnes making plays. And to me, that says, okay, it's spring ball. It's now or never for me to kind of make a stance and say, hey, if Cam Hart and Clarence Lewis and Benjamin Morrison, aren't the guys who are going to be on the field for whatever reason in the fall, maybe they need a breather. Maybe it's just the rotation of defensive backs like you see in any college football program. Who's it going to be? And I thought Clarence Lewis looked as good as he's looked since I've been here. This is going on my third Notre Dame season. Like I said, the last couple of years, I mean, he kind of lost his job in that room, right? And I don't think he's going to get that starting job back, but he could get more reps. He looked really good making PBUs, and Ryan Barnes made a couple of PBUs. He even forced a fumble on Jaden Greathouse, who was another offensive player who I don't want to say he stood out because he was catching balls like 3 to 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. Again, that's what Notre Dame seemed to be working on that day. But he caught a lot of passes, and Ryan Barnes was actually running with him into the flat on one of these and swatted the ball out of his hands, and it was going like. And again, this is one of those situations where you're sitting there watching and you say, okay, if that happened on a Saturday in a college football game, that ball is actually going the other way, and that's the defense's ball. Ryan Barnes was making those types of plays. So I thought those guys looked good. And then if you go read Patrick Ingles' article at blueandgold.com, a couple of the freshman linebackers actually look really good too. I thought Preston Zinter was a guy that was kind of disruptive, and Drake Bowen as well. These are kind of bigger linebackers who have come in right away, and that's the conversation with Notre Dame right now is like, you have these 3 graduates at linebacker, but are they going to be the ones making all these plays on Saturdays? Like last year, they played a whole lot, but how many times were we like, man, Maris Leofau is that guy, or JD Bertrand, he's making all these tackles, but which one do you say, whoa, he's a game changer at the position right here? So I think Drake Bowen, Preston Zinter, some of those freshman linebackers can morph into those types of playmaking guys quicker and maybe just exceed anything that those graduates have ever done at Notre Dame. And you're seeing it right away because these guys are supposed to be in high school right now. They look like college football linebackers right now, and it was pretty impressive.
That's really encouraging to hear, especially considering what we know that is in that sophomore class of linebackers, although that room is thinned out a little bit because junior Tuialamak has moved over to Viper. And then you mentioned the cornerbacks. I mean, what Mike Mickens has done with that room in such a short period of time is really incredible. That, for the longest time, that was the Achilles heel of Notre Dame, probably before you got around to the team. But man, there were some grim years on the outside, but it's good to hear that things have turned up. But I'm curious to know, how was the offensive coaching staff processing everything that was going down on Saturday? Because not only were there a lot of reporters there were a lot of recruits and their families there as well. So they had quite an audience watching a pretty ugly display of offense. So how was the coaching staff handling it? How were they communicating with the players, all that?
Luckily, the media was kind of like on this catwalk. I don't know if you've ever been in the Irish Athletic Center, but we're elevated on a sideline and we get this bird's eye view. So it's almost as if I think we got a better vantage point as to what was actually happening than the recruits and everyone that was on the field. Because if you're on the field, you're like, okay, hey, there's Sam Hartman. He just threw an incompletion. You're not charting every single pass like I did and putting it online. But to your point in question, there was a point where this was all unfolding and it got to like the middle or latter stages of what was going on. And I looked at Patrick Ingold to my left and I was like, where's Gerad Parker during all this? Because I kind of want to watch what he's thinking as all this is going down, because Gino Guidugli was kind of by the quarterbacks. And then I look and Parker was kind of like signaling things in from the sideline like he would in a game. And it didn't look like he ever lost confidence or optimism or anything. It wasn't like throwing a headset like you would in a game or something like that. And Marcus Freeman, for that matter, was kind of just taking it all in as well and like saying, okay, this is what it is. So that's why I really want to ask these guys the next time we get the availability, kind of what was the game plan or practice plan for that day? Because I just have a hard time thinking that that's what they're going to run out against Navy on August 26th is an offense where you have a guy like Sam Hartman and you're just running these shallow crossers and dump offs to tight ends and dump offs to running backs. Look, every offense needs that, and you're going to see a little bit of that. And if that's all they wanted to get in that day, then honestly, they kind of got it, because the defense probably knows what's coming too, right? You have to think about that too. I think it's a lot easier for the defense to win any practice. Like I said, I'm going into my 3rd season covering Notre Dame football, so I've seen a lot of these open practices now. I'm pretty sure the defense has won them every single time. Now that might say more like that might say a little something about Notre Dame, but it's not like Notre Dame is totally incapable of running out a good offense. I think this is going to be probably the best offense that I've seen here, minus Kyron Williams. I know, like, if this offense had Kyron Williams, for example, I think that they would just be off the charts. But you still have Audric Estime, you still have Logan Diggs. They're going to be really good. That's why when I was looking at these coaches, to go back to your question, they never really were like, whoa, this is the worst practice I've ever seen, because I think there was more to it than what we're writing. And I'll tell your listeners that. I'll tell everyone at blueandgold.com. I'm just telling you what I saw on this day. Now, if we get added context, it's going to help you. It's going to help me. But it seemed like the coaches were just kind of like going with the flow, and it was what it was that day.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I don't know if the coaching staff would ever say it out loud, but we've kind of learned about Marcus Freeman and the access to the team and how his philosophies are a little bit different. Like, I think he makes the coaching staff and the players a lot more accessible than Brian Kelly did. Like, you're getting, frequent discussions with the coordinators every week throughout the season, players as well, but access to the actual practices is pretty limited. So I wonder if maybe they changed the plan knowing that it was going to be an open practice and there were going to be a lot of people in attendance. I don't know if they'd actually say that out loud, but I think that definitely could play a part in that. We'll be right back with Tyler Horka in a second, but first I want to tell you about Built Bar. The Built March Madness bracket is here, and we know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites today. You know, I'll be voting for the Brownie Batter Puff Bar, and if you want your team to win, then you'll be voting for that bar too. Support your team, support your bar, and when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puff delivered monthly straight to your door. You've got to try Built. It's the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing you won't think they're good for you. And what makes Built bars or puffs so good? Well, for starters, they're all high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. So run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick today. Now, you wrote a really interesting piece on blueandgold.com about Gerad Parker and how he doesn't really have time for a trial run as the new offensive coordinator, given the talent he has on the roster. How much pressure is on him to get this figured out by the time the season rolls around?
I think there's a lot of pressure on him, and it's not like he can do much about it. So it's a really difficult situation for him to be in because you're offered the offensive coordinator job at Notre Dame. You don't say no. It wasn't like he was like, okay, I'm 42 years old. I know I want to do this someday, but is this the right time? Like, could this tank my career? You're not thinking about any of that. You're like, yes, sign me up right now. And now that you actually get into it, though, like I wrote at blueandgold.com in the piece that you referenced, you have the best ACC quarterback, one of the best ACC quarterbacks of all time. In terms of passing touchdowns, nobody has done it better than him. He's got 12,000 yards to his name, Sam Hartman. You have a dude right there. And if for whatever reason he doesn't work out, never wish an injury on anybody. He's had them in his careers. He's had health issues, whatever. If it doesn't work out for Sam Hartman, you have a guy in Tyler Buckner who was supposed to start all 13 games last year. And if you don't go out and get Hartman in the transfer portal, he's going to start all 13 games this year. You have two really good quarterbacks, is my point. And you have probably the best stable of wide receiver talent that you've had at Notre Dame, at least in the last 2 or 3 years. You have two really good running backs who just combined for 1,700 yards in Estime and Diggs. You have Chris Tyree, a guy that everyone thought was going to be an awesome running back, moving to wide receiver because you're so deep at running back. You mentioned Jadarian Price earlier. I think he's going to be an awesome number 3 running back for this team if that's the direction that it's headed. Long story short, minus Kyron, who I mentioned earlier, and a guy like Michael Mayer, who's going to get drafted in the first round later this month, you've got everything that you would want offensively. So if the offense is the reason that this team only wins 8 or 9 games again this season, that puts Gerad Parker in Marcus Freeman in an interesting position as to what to do with Gerad Parker, because you can't go too far down a road of, okay, let's let this guy figure it out. It's, hey, we want to win national championships and we kind of want to do it right now. As I mentioned in that piece, the Georgia Bulldogs just averaged 53.5 points per game in 2 college football playoff games. There are offensive world beaters out there. And if you can't be that, then, what are you really doing here? And I don't know if Gerad Parker is ever going to get Notre Dame to a 53.5 point, plateau in 2 games at the highest stage with everyone watching. But I mean, we've seen enough college football to know that you don't have to score that many points. Georgia could have scored 8 points and won the national title game against TCU. So I just think that there is a lot of pressure on him because name of the game in college football right now is offense. Georgia's led by Kirby Smart, a defensive guy, but he'd be the first to tell you if we don't have talented offense and we don't have really good offensive coaches to teach those guys up, then we're not going to win everything that we want to win in college football, which is a national championship. So I think there's immense pressure on him because he wasn't the first or second choice for Marcus Freeman either. So now, does that give him a little bit of house money to play with? Absolutely. But you can't go out there and put a product that tanks on the field because Notre Dame wants to win and wants to win right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the fact, how that search went down and how we all saw it play out, where we know he wasn't the first option, he wasn't really the second one either. Fans aren't going to take a while to turn on him if the offense is not performing like they should on Saturday. So a lot of pressure, but I still think, he's got plenty of time. He's still implementing his offense. And one of the new things he did, and you brought him up already, Tyree, in his move over to wide receiver. Saturday was the first time you got to see him get real reps at the slot going against a live defense. And I know he struggled a little bit. And I think some of that is to be expected because he's learning an entirely new position. But I feel like at wide receiver, you could tell pretty early on if it's definitely not going to work. Like, I can remember when I was in high school, we had this safety who was a great athlete, but he was behind the two starters, and they tried to get him some reps at receiver in practice just to see what he could do. And I mean, after like 3 periods, it was like, okay, nope, that's not going to work. Like, he was a good athlete, but just had no sense of the position because it's just different compared to playing defensive back or really any other position on the field. So when you're looking at Tyree, did you get the sense that this could work eventually? Like, did he show flashes, or he just has a steeper learning curve than we previously thought?
No, he showed flashes for sure. I mean, he drew, of those 35 throws that I mentioned earlier in the 11 periods, he probably drew the most targets. I'd have to go back and look, but I want to say it was 5, 6, maybe 7 targets to Tyree alone. And this goes back to my point of, I think they were really trying to drill in certain routes because it looked like he was running the same little crossing route over and over and over again. And he was open over and over and over again. Most of those incompletions were because Sam Hartman missed them. Cornerback was maybe draped over him. And that's where Tyree has to improve, is he knows he's open running across the middle of the field, but he feels the presence of a defensive back there. And you could tell from our bird's eye view that it looked like he was thinking about what was going to happen after he made the catch before he made it. And all of a sudden the ball's like sailing a little too far over his head. Because I have a hard time thinking that Sam Hartman missed the same throw 3 or 4 times the same way, and it was his fault every single time. Maybe it was. I'm not the one in that position making that throw. But as I wrote for my observations at blueandgold.com, was Tyree's a talented athlete. He's going to get open. He just has to like find himself as a wide receiver before he puts it all together. Because like you said, there's sometimes and you see it and you're like, okay, that dude is going to do it at some point. I would put Tyree in that category. Never did I watch him on Saturday and I was like, it's never going to pan out. Because like I said, he was getting open. He was there. It's just the whole thing, the chemistry thing with the quarterbacks, the chemistry piece, all of these things have to come together for him to be there. And then I would add that he's working really hard mechanically with some of this stuff too. Some of these drills that Chancey Stuckey has these guys doing where they're jumping over a little like step hurdle that you would use.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, where he's trying to like get them to work on their balance, agility, explosiveness, all of these little things. Tyree's usually the one to go last because he's watching all of these guys who have done this their whole lives at the wide receiver position. And then he steps up and Stuckey gets a little closer and tries to say, this is what you need to be doing, because body type, so like just muscle memory, some of all these things, Tyree very much still looks like a running back out there. But I think with these spring practices, a summer and then fall camp, he can be one of those 5'10", 190-pound dudes who you see catch like 60 to 70. I'm not saying Tyree's going to catch 60 to 70 balls, but you see it every year in college football where a guy that size catches that many passes over the middle of the field because he's fast, he gets open, and if he has good hands, you just put it on him every single time. Tyree could get to a point like that where he's a very dependable piece for Notre Dame.
That's good to hear because, like I was saying, that transition is not easy. Like, even if he shows the ability to catch the ball as a running back, actually going and playing in the slot and running routes where you're split out wide and you're going against a linebacker or a safety, whatever the case may be, it's difficult. And he's been playing one position for his entire life, so now learning a brand new one is tough. So I think a learning curve is expected, but it's good to hear that he showed some flashes. Now, you talked a lot about the quarterbacks. I know you charted every single pass that they threw on Saturday, so you were dialed into that. We could talk about the individual performances, but I'm a little bit more curious to hear, how did the staff rotate them? Because I think that's very telling as it relates to where we're at with the quarterback competition.
Yeah, Buckner and Hartman were pretty much 1A, 1B, and I would not say one was 1A, one was 1B. They pretty much got the same amount of reps. It seemed like they both got 2. I don't know how. Maybe it was 5-minute periods, 10-minute periods, whatever it was. They got the same amount of time. They put Hartman out there first, and he went through his plays. They don't give these guys the same exact plays because the defense would know what the heck was coming. But they give them the same amount of time, and I think they pretty much ended up almost throwing the same amount of passes. Maybe Hartman threw 1 or 2 more passes, but Hartman went out first. Buckner followed him up. They went and did some individual drills. They came back and did the same exact thing. Then Buckner went first and Hartman followed him up. So at the end of that, you had 2 periods each. One guy started first, the other guy started first the next time. So it was legitimate 1A, 1B. You couldn't tell who the starter was. Maybe, again, you mentioned some strategy involved with the coaching staff and what they were showing recruits, what they were showing the media. Maybe that was part of it. But if they wanted to sell it as a wide open quarterback competition between 2 guys, that's what it was. Because I mentioned earlier, Kenny Minchey didn't get any reps in those 11-on-11 periods. And then Steve Angeli got maybe 1.5 total, and he ended up throwing 8 passes. I thought Steve Angeli looked actually pretty good. He might have had the best throw of the 11-on-11 periods, where it was the same corner route that I was mentioning earlier that Colsey got open on, Merriweather got open on once, and Caleb Smith fought really hard, actually drew a pass interference call on one of those. Rico Flores Jr. got wide open, and Steve Angeli hit him on the money. It was kind of like the same, maybe not the same video that we've seen Notre Dame tweet out. I think I tweeted it out as well, where Rico Flores Jr. caught one on the sideline. Rico Flores Jr. was so open this time that he was able to stand up, put 2 feet in bounds, get out of bounds, probably like a 15-yard catch. So Steve Angeli, until he was intercepted by Ryan Barnes at the very last part of the practice, the very final play of the practice, looked pretty good. But yeah, as far as Hartman and Buckner go, 1A, 1B, it was interesting. It still seems like this thing is wide open, but it's only it's early April, right? I think it's going to remain wide open at least until the first week of August.
Yeah, if I had to guess, they'll probably announce the starting quarterback around the same time they did last year with Buckner and Pine. But that's Marcus Freeman's call, as well as Gerad Parker's, and this is Marcus Freeman's second spring, and he's been pretty open about the fact that he's a lot more comfortable in his position now than he was at this time last year. Have you noticed any major differences in the structure of practice, or just maybe how he operates during them now compared to what you saw last spring?
Yeah, he looks a lot more comfortable. I was mentioning it to everyone around me. I think last year at this time, the big buzzwords were like energy and movement and chaos. Yeah, exactly. Enhance.
That's still one, yeah.
Enhance was the number one buzzword by far. But in terms of players' perspectives, they kept telling us like, whoa, we're doing a whole lot. And I think maybe they were doing too much because some things were kind of going over people's heads maybe, or maybe they were so in the moment and drilled into these things that they weren't really processing what they were doing. I thought in this 2-hour session that we got on Saturday, there was a lot more intensive individual drill work where it wasn't just up and down the field of 11-on-11. You don't even really know what just happened in a drive. Like, how many times do you watch a football game and you can't really remember a specific drive from the second quarter because by the time it's the fourth quarter, it's tight and you're like, it doesn't matter now. This is all that matters. This practice had more of you kind of remember every little thing that happened because it was a little more slowed down. It was, hey, we're going to do this, and then we're going to go do individual work, probably talk about what just happened. There were a lot of times where I saw the quarterbacks huddled up after one of those 11-on-11 sessions, and pretty much every other position group was going through some sort of mechanical drill or technique, whatever it was. Gino Guidugli was just straight up talking to these guys, and they didn't do anything but have the helmets off, maybe look at a clipboard, listen to what Gino was saying. I think they were actually like internalizing and processing what just happened. Whereas last year at this time, it was hectic, like, hey, we got to do all this right now. Enhance, right? I think he has taken a step back and he's like, hey, we get a lot of these practices. Let's really understand what we're doing with them. And there'll probably come a time where Marcus Freeman doesn't like what he's seeing. And he's like, okay, we need to have one of these. Let's just get to it, drill it in, go type of practices. This was not that. So it was definitely a change from last year.
All right, last question before we let you go. We're about halfway through spring practice here. The spring game is a little bit under 3 weeks away. And by now, I'm sure you've heard whispers about who's been playing well and who hasn't when the practices aren't as open to the media. With that in mind, which guys are you most excited to see in the blue and gold game here in a few weeks?
Tobias Merriweather still at the top of my list because we didn't get to see like those videos that I was Notre Dame has been tweeting out. We didn't get to see that where Merriweather's like trying to make a contested catch against Benjamin Morrison, All-American of all people. We didn't get to see that. So Tobias Merriweather from the offense is a guy that I want to see in a situation where it's more like a game and he's going to go and ball out. If Tobias Merriweather has 5 catches and the touchdown in the spring game, and I know it's just a spring game, I think the message boards are going to burn down. I think Twitter's going to burn down. Notre Dame fans everywhere are going to be going crazy and calling him the Biletnikoff winner. But for him from the offense and from the defense, Jason Anye is a guy that I've actually heard, and he's a guy that I saw making disruptive plays even on Saturday as well. Just one of those defensive linemen who has never really gotten the chance because there's been so many people ahead of him on the depth chart every year that he's been at Notre Dame. But every time 2 years ago when I first got here, I was going to practice, and I think he was injured at the time, actually. And I was like, who the heck is that guy standing over there in street clothes? And it was Jason Anye, just because he's a big dude. He's a strong dude, one of those workout warrior types that everyone always talks so highly about. So I'm excited to see if you give him a chance in a situation like a spring game where maybe he even starts in that game, because as the Notre Dame coaches have said, they really haven't honed in on a starting defensive line. They kind of shake it up and say, hey, you start this day, you start that day. Maybe that's his day, and maybe he makes the most of it, because I think he's a guy that if he does, and if he does get a lot of momentum going into the year, maybe you finally see a Jason Anye that is plugging up the middle and making plays on Saturdays in the fall.
All right, he is Tyler Horka from Blue and Gold 9-3. Thanks so much for the time, man. I'm glad we got to squeeze this in.
Yeah, these conversations are always awesome.
That's going to do it for me today. Thanks again to Tyler, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. On the way out, remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and give us a follow on Twitter at LockedOnIrish, on Instagram at LockedOnIrishPod, and my personal Twitter account at Tyler Wojciak. That's at Tyler, Wojciak. For your second listen, check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball, where experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court, plus hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. That's Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you guys tomorrow.